The story of time, from the Big Bang to the first human. Chapter 1, The Birth of Everything. In the beginning, there was nothing. No time. No space. No light. Only a singular point of infinite density, where the rules of physics themselves did not exist. Then, in a moment beyond imagination, it happened, the Big Bang. Space erupted, stretching faster than light. Time began its endless march. Energy spilled into the newborn cosmos. Particles collided, separated, danced, and vanished in patterns that would one day give shape to everything. Hydrogen, helium, the simplest elements, formed first. They swirled in violent clouds, collapsing under their own gravity. The universe was young, chaotic, but alive with potential. In these first instants, quantum fluctuations whispered secrets of matter, energy, and the forces that would govern galaxies. Stars were born from these clouds, tiny sparks igniting in the darkness. Each star was a furnace, forging heavier elements inside its heart. Carbon, oxygen, iron, the building blocks of planets and life, were born in fire and death. When these stars exploded in supernovae, they scattered their contents across space, seeding the universe with possibility. Galaxies began to form. Clusters of stars swirled into spirals and ellipses. Gravity shaped the vast cosmic architecture. Dark matter held invisible scaffolding, guiding the dance of billions of suns. Time flowed, uncountable, and the stage for our own story was slowly being prepared. Around 9 billion years after the Big Bang, a cloud of gas and dust collapsed under gravity in a quiet corner of the Milky Way. A new star ignited, our sun planets coalesced around it, spinning in perfect orbits. One small, molten sphere became Earth. Violent impacts sculpted its surface, one of which formed the moon. Volcanoes raged. The atmosphere thickened. Water arrived, possibly from comets, coating the surface with oceans. In these oceans, life began. The first molecules capable of self-replication appeared. Simple cells formed, invisible to the eye, yet capable of multiplying, evolving, and persisting. For billions of years, they dominated the oceans, experimenting with form and function. Oxygen began to change the atmosphere, slowly transforming the chemistry of the planet. Mass extinctions wiped out countless species, yet each catastrophe also created opportunities for complexity to rise. Life became more intricate. Multicellular organisms emerged. Skeletons, shells, and new organs appeared. The Cambrian explosion unfolded, bringing an explosion of diversity. Eyes opened for the first time. Predators hunted. Ecosystems became interconnected, intricate, and fragile. Plants colonized the land, reshaping the atmosphere. Amphibians, insects, and reptiles followed. Forests and rivers carved the landscape. Mountains rose and eroded. Earth itself became alive in rhythm with the living creatures it supported. Every event in this chain, from the smallest particle to the largest asteroid, led to one inevitable outcome: the world became ready for its first humans. The universe, in its vastness and precision, had prepared a stage for life that would eventually gaze back at the cosmos, ask questions, and wonder at its own existence. Chapter 2, The First Life Evolves. Earth was no longer a molten sphere. Oceans swirled under a thin atmosphere. Lightning flashed across skies heavy with volcanic ash. In these restless waters, chemistry became poetry. Simple molecules collided, linked, and replicated. Hydrogen, carbon, nitrogen, and oxygen danced in endless combinations. Life, in its tiniest form, began to stir. Single-celled organisms emerged. They were invisible sparks, yet they carried the power to change the planet forever. For billions of years, these cells multiplied, mutated, and adapted. Some learned to harness sunlight, photosynthesis, turning light into energy and slowly filling the atmosphere with oxygen. This great oxidation event changed everything. The sky turned blue, oceans shifted, and the chemistry of life itself transformed. Microscopic battles unfolded. Cells merged, exchanged DNA, invented defense, and hunted. Complexity grew in silence. Simple colonies of cells became specialized tissues, experimenting with cooperation, division of labor, and communication. Life was learning to organize itself. By the time continents stabilized, life had already become an intricate network. Microbes shaped rocks. Cyanobacteria pumped oxygen into the air. Stromatolites built layered structures visible even from space. Each organism, however small, played a role in the unfolding symphony of life. Then came multicellular life. Small organisms grew larger, forming networks of cells that could specialize in movement, sensing, and digestion. The first predators appeared, driving an arms race that accelerated evolution. Armor, claws, and speed evolved. Ecosystems became complex, fragile, and interdependent. The oceans teemed with life forms we can barely imagine, strange shells, spines, and eyes. The first eyes opened to see light, casting a new awareness across the seas. Life was no longer just surviving. It was experimenting. Some forms would dominate for millions of years, others would vanish without a trace. Extinctions came and went, vast, brutal, natural resets, yet each time, life returned more resilient, more diverse. Through all this, Earth's surface shifted. Plates collided, oceans widened, mountains rose, and volcanoes reshaped continents. Life adapted with every change, learning to endure, to innovate, to persist. These tiny, invisible organisms had begun a journey that would, eventually, lead to creatures capable of curiosity, imagination, and thought. The stage was almost set for something unprecedented, the first animals venturing onto land. Life, patient and persistent, had prepared the world for a story that could finally look back at itself and ask, "Why am I here?" Chapter 3: Colonizing the Land. For millions of years, life thrived in the oceans. But the land was empty, waiting. Rivers carved valleys, winds shaped mountains, and sunlight bathed barren landscapes. Then, the first pioneers emerged, creatures brave enough to leave the safety of water and venture onto solid ground. Amphibians crawled onto muddy shores, lungs taking in air for the first time. Limbs pushed against gravity. Skin evolved to resist drying. Each step was a gamble. Life was learning to adapt not only to survive, but to conquer. Plants had already begun the transformation. Tiny algae became moss, then ferns, then towering trees. Forests rose, creating habitats and shelter. Oxygen levels stabilized, allowing larger, more complex organisms to breathe. Life on land became possible, but the world was still harsh. Storms, droughts, and predators tested every adaptation. The first insects scuttled across leaves. Arthropods discovered flight. Wings became instruments of freedom, bringing species to new territories. Predators followed, hunting with precision. Evolution raced, sculpting speed, armor, and senses. Eyes became more complex, capable of depth and color. Movement became coordinated, brains grew larger relative to bodies. Amphibians gave rise to reptiles, creatures fully adapted to dry land. Scales replaced delicate skin. Eggs were laid on land, shielded from drying. New niches opened, deserts, forests, plains. Predation drove innovation. Armor, spikes, and teeth evolved, shaping life through trial, competition, and survival. The Earth itself continued to change. Continents drifted, colliding, and splitting. Volcanoes erupted, shaping landscapes. Mountains rose, rivers shifted. Life adapted to every upheaval. It was a time of experimentation on a planetary scale. By the end of this era, land was no longer empty. It was alive, teeming with plants, insects, amphibians, and reptiles. Life had mastered air, water, and soil. Every ecological niche was claimed. The planet had become a complex system, interwoven and resilient. And yet, something extraordinary was still to come. From these ancient forests, rivers, and plains, creatures would emerge that could think, feel, and imagine. The stage for the first humans was being quietly prepared, step by careful evolutionary step. Chapter 4: The Age of Mammals. After the reign of reptiles, the Earth was scarred and quiet. A mass extinction had swept away the giants, leaving empty landscapes and open skies. But life is never silent for long. In the shadow of loss, opportunity arose. Mammals, small and unassuming at first, began to explore these new worlds. Fur kept them warm. Night became their ally. Sharp senses guided them through forests and plains. Some hunted insects, others scurried for seeds. Their brains grew, slowly, almost imperceptibly, as they learned patterns, remembered dangers, and solved small problems. As continents drifted, new climates emerged. Ice ages came and went. Deserts expanded, forests contracted, mountains rose. Mammals adapted with each change. Some became runners, others climbers. Some grazed, others hunted. Evolution experimented with form, speed, and strategy. Primates appeared, small creatures clinging to trees, learning balance and dexterity. Hands evolved, capable of gripping, holding, manipulating. Eyes faced forward, giving depth perception, the gift of calculation and planning. Social bonds grew. Families became communities. Communication evolved from simple gestures to complex signals. Cooperation began to shape survival. Rivers and forests were classrooms of trial. Life learned to hunt, to hide, to nurture. Each generation passed on adaptations, slowly building intelligence, curiosity, and memory. The seeds of thought were planted in these early mammals. Meanwhile, the Earth continued its slow dance. Volcanoes erupted, earthquakes shifted landscapes, glaciers advanced and retreated. Every upheaval tested life, forcing innovation and resilience. Life became not just survival, but a story of ingenuity and persistence. In these fragile ecosystems, the ancestors of humans began their journey. Small, unremarkable creatures at first, they would evolve into something capable of understanding stars, fire, and even themselves. The stage was nearly ready for the first spark of consciousness, the dawn of humanity itself. Chapter 5: The Dawn of Humans. In the forests and savannas of Africa, a quiet revolution began. Small groups of primates, already intelligent and social, began to walk more upright. Hands became tools, minds became sharp. They learned to plan, to cooperate, to observe. The first humans, Homo habilis, appeared. Their brains were larger, capable of simple reasoning and tool-making. Stones were shaped to cut, dig, and hunt. Fire was discovered, a spark that would illuminate not just the dark, but the future. Warmth, protection, and cooking changed their lives. Food became easier to digest, energy more abundant, bodies stronger, minds sharper. Communication grew beyond simple sounds. Gestures, expressions, and words began to form the first languages. Communities shared knowledge, where to find water, which plants were safe, how to hunt together. Cooperation became survival. Curiosity became power. Humans migrated across Africa, following rivers, herds, and seasons. They adapted to deserts, forests, and mountains. Each environment tested their ingenuity. Clothing and shelters were crafted from hides and branches. Tools became more sophisticated, spears, bows, and eventually traps. Science, in its earliest form, emerged as observation. Humans noticed the patterns of the sun, the moon, and the stars. Seasons were predicted, tides understood. They began to shape their world, learning to manipulate fire, water, and stone. Yet life was never easy. Predators roamed, diseases struck, and survival was never guaranteed. Every challenge sharpened humanity, forcing innovation, planning, and cooperation. Every small discovery, the wheel of a rock, the spark of a flint, the tip of a spear, was a step toward civilization. By the time of Homo sapiens, humans were no longer just part of nature, they were beginning to observe it, record it, and imagine it. They created art on cave walls, told stories around fires, and began to ask the questions that would define humanity. Why are we here? What comes next? From the chaos of evolution, from the patient shaping of the earth and its creatures, the first humans stood, aware of themselves, ready to change the world in ways no other species had ever dreamed. Chapter 6: Early Human Societies. Humans no longer wandered alone. Small groups gathered, forming bands that shared food, knowledge, and protection. Cooperation became the foundation of survival. Each member had a role: hunters, gatherers, toolmakers, caretakers, and each skill mattered. By the time humans began to disperse across continents, they carried not just genes, but stories, strategies, and knowledge. These early societies were fragile, adaptive, and ingenious, a blueprint for every civilization that would come after. The world was vast, dangerous, and full of possibility. And humans, armed with intelligence, curiosity, and cooperation, were ready to leave the forests and rivers, to farm, to build, and to shape the earth itself. Chapter 7: The Agricultural Revolution. For thousands of years, humans wandered the land, hunting and gathering. Then, a quiet change began. Some noticed that seeds dropped near camp would sprout. Grains grew where they were planted. Water and soil could be managed. The first experiment in farming began. Farming was not just survival. It was control over life itself. Humans learned to plant, irrigate, and harvest. Wheat, barley, rice, and maize became staples. Domestication of animals followed. Goats, sheep, cows, and pigs provided meat, milk, and labor. Humanity began to shape ecosystems to its needs. Settlements emerged. Small villages appeared near rivers and fertile land. Houses were built from mud, wood, and stone. Tools became more specialized: sickles, hoes, grinding stones. Storage pits preserved food through seasons, reducing the risk of famine. Social structures formed. Cooperation intensified. Roles divided: some tended fields, others hunted, others crafted tools. Knowledge became communal. Science, in its earliest form, emerged from observation. Humans tracked seasons, studied soil, predicted floods, and measured time. Astronomy guided planting and harvesting. Calendars were born from watching the sun, moon, and stars. Humans were learning to predict, to plan, to master their environment. Conflict and cooperation both increased. Villages traded surplus food. Ideas, skills, and resources spread. Yet with permanence came vulnerability. Epidemics, resource scarcity, and territorial disputes became new challenges. Humans adapted, building walls, weapons, and alliances. Agriculture transformed human consciousness. Time became measured. Labor became structured. Life became interconnected. Humans were no longer mere wanderers, they were engineers of the land, architects of the first societies. This revolution planted the seeds for civilization. With stable food, populations grew. Villages expanded into towns. Knowledge accumulated. The first steps toward cities, writing, and governance had begun. Humanity was moving from survival toward history itself. Chapter 8: The First Cities and Kingdoms. From the villages of the agricultural revolution, larger communities began to rise. Rivers provided water, fertile land, and trade routes. The first cities appeared in Mesopotamia, Egypt, the Indus Valley, and China. Mud brick homes lined streets. Temples and granaries became centers of power. Life became organized, structured, and interconnected. With population growth came specialization. Some became farmers, others artisans, traders, or scribes. Leadership emerged. Chiefs and kings claimed authority, often justified by God's or divine will. Religion and politics intertwined, guiding the behavior of entire populations. Social hierarchies became more complex. Nobles, priests, and warriors held power, while workers, farmers, and servants maintained the city's foundation. Science and knowledge advanced. Writing systems were invented: cuneiform in Sumer, hieroglyphs in Egypt. Records of trade, laws, and events were kept on clay, papyrus, or stone. Mathematics, astronomy, and engineering were applied to architecture, irrigation, and calendars. Cities became laboratories of human ingenuity. Trade expanded. Roads, rivers, and boats connected communities across regions. Resources, ideas, and culture spread. Metal tools and weapons enhanced productivity and power. Markets flourished. Wealth became measurable, creating both opportunity and inequality. Conflict became inevitable. Cities fought for land, water, and resources. Fortifications were built. Armies formed. Diplomacy and war shaped the rise and fall of early kingdoms. Yet through it all, civilization progressed. Art, music, and literature began to flourish, reflecting human thought, belief, and creativity. By the time kingdoms solidified their power, humans had transformed the planet. From wild landscapes, they created structured cities. From simple survival, they had built societies governed by law, culture, and knowledge. Civilization had begun its long, winding story, a story of ambition, ingenuity, and the fragile balance between order and chaos. Chapter 9, Writing, Law, and Civilization. With the rise of cities, humans faced new challenges. How to record trade, track resources, or settle disputes among growing populations. The answer came in the form of writing, symbols pressed into clay, carved into stone, or painted on papyrus. Cuneiform in Sumer recorded transactions, prayers, and laws. Hieroglyphs in Egypt documented kings, temples, and monumental events. The Indus script, mysterious but precise, marked trade and governance. Writing allowed humans to store knowledge, transmit ideas, and shape history itself. Laws followed naturally. Societies needed rules. Hammurabi's code in Babylon was one of the earliest, declaring justice, punishment, and social order. Kings, priests, and councils wielded authority, guiding civilization with principles, rituals, and decrees. Science, mathematics, and engineering grew alongside law. Irrigation systems, canals, and granaries reflected understanding of hydraulics, geometry, and organization. Trade expanded. Cities were connected by rivers, roads, and seas. Merchants exchanged goods, culture, and knowledge. Civilizations influenced each other, learning faster than ever before. Yet with order came conflict. Empires rose and fell. Kings claimed power, wars erupted, cities were sacked. Civilization was fragile, but resilient. Every destruction carried seeds for renewal. Art and storytelling flourished. Temples, statues, and murals captured beliefs, victories, and myths. Music and poetry echoed in the streets and halls. Humans were no longer just survivors, they were creators, thinkers, and recorders of their own existence. By mastering writing and law, humans transformed society. Knowledge could transcend a lifetime, reach distant lands, and shape generations. Civilization was no longer temporary, it was now a persistent force. The first empires had risen, and with them, humanity began to write its destiny. Chapter 10, The Rise and Fall of Early Empires. From cities and kingdoms, the first empires arose. In Mesopotamia, Sumerian city-states united under kings. Ziggurats rose, canals irrigated. Fields and trade networks stretched across deserts. In Egypt, the Nile nourished Pharaoh's power. Pyramids pierced the sky, tombs held treasures, and law and religion intertwined to guide society. In the Indus Valley, cities like Mohenjo-daro and Harappa showcased urban planning, water management, and social organization. In China, dynasties began to form along rivers, introducing bronze, writing, and philosophy that would endure for millennia. Empires thrived through innovation. Agriculture supported large populations. Metallurgy, tools, and construction allowed monumental architecture. Mathematics and astronomy guided trade, farming, and rituals. Writing recorded achievements, histories, and laws. Science and culture flourished. Art, music, literature, and rituals reflected identity, power, and belief. Civilizations reached heights previously unimaginable. Yet, empires were fragile. Power bred ambition. Expansion created conflict. Natural disasters, droughts, and famine tested resilience. Internal corruption and rebellion weakened rulers. External invasion toppled once great cities. The same rivers that nourished life sometimes flooded or shifted. The same deserts that protected kingdoms also isolated them. Even the stars, once guides, were silent witnesses to decline. Each fall left lessons for the next generation. Knowledge, technology, and culture survived in fragments. Writing preserved history. Tools endured. Trade networks adapted. Ideas migrated. Civilization was not linear. Rise and fall were cycles, repeated across time and space. Humanity learned that growth required balance, between nature and culture, freedom and order, ambition and humility. From the ashes of early empires, humans carried forward tools, knowledge, and vision. They had built cities, cultivated societies, and mastered techniques that would one day support civilizations far grander. The story of empires was a mirror. Power was temporary, but knowledge and culture could endure. From the ashes of early empires, humans carried forward tools, knowledge, and vision. They had built cities, cultivated societies, and mastered techniques that would one day support civilizations far grander. The story of empires was a mirror. Power was temporary, but knowledge and culture could endure, a foundation for all future human history. Chapter 11, Science, Religion, and Early Thought. A foundation for all future human history. Chapter 11, Science, Religion, and Early Thought. As empires grew, humans began to ask questions beyond survival. Why does the sun rise? Why do rivers flood? Why do seasons change? Observation became a tool, and curiosity became a form of power. Religion and science were intertwined. Humans looked to the heavens for guidance. Stars became calendars. Moon cycles guided planting and festivals. Gods were imagined as forces of nature, guardians of rivers, forests, and skies. Temples became observatories. Priests were both spiritual guides and recorders of time. Humans developed early mathematics to measure fields, build structures, and predict celestial events. Geometry and arithmetic emerged from practical needs, irrigation canals, city layouts, and monuments. Astronomy flourished. The movements of planets and stars were recorded meticulously, forming the basis of early calendars and navigation. Philosophy quietly appeared. People began to ponder life, death, and morality. What is justice? What is the purpose of human effort? Early thinkers debated existence and the laws of nature. Their questions were simple, but their insight profound. Science, in its embryonic form, emerged from this blend of observation, ritual, and reasoning. Humans experimented with metals, discovered alloys, and tested tools. Medicine appeared as humans observed symptoms, remedies, and the effects of plants. They learned patterns of cause and effect. Knowledge became cumulative. Art, storytelling, and symbols reflected thought and belief. Myths encoded history, morality, and survival strategies. Songs, carvings, and paintings preserved knowledge and identity. Humans were no longer just participants in the natural world, they were observers, recorders, and interpreters. By blending observation with imagination, humans began to shape not only the world around them but also their understanding of it. They planted the seeds of reason, creativity, and inquiry that would eventually grow into the sciences, philosophy, and history itself. The mind of humanity was awakening, and the journey from survival to understanding had truly begun. Chapter 12, Trade, Innovation, and Cultural Exchange. As civilizations matured, humans discovered the power of connection. Goods, ideas, and knowledge began to flow between cities, regions, and continents. Rivers, roads, and seas became highways of civilization. Trade was no longer just about survival, it became a force that shaped society. Merchants carried grains, metals, pottery, and textiles. Ideas traveled alongside goods. Writing systems spread. Architectural techniques were shared. Calendars, mathematics, and medicine moved from one culture to another. Knowledge became a currency as valuable as gold. Innovation accelerated. New tools and techniques appeared faster than ever. Bronze and later iron reshaped agriculture, warfare, and construction. Wheels, plows, and irrigation systems increased productivity. Cities grew larger, supported by trade and technology. Knowledge accumulated, allowing civilizations to reach heights unimaginable in earlier eras. Cultural exchange also enriched belief systems and art. Gods and myths traveled with traders, merging into hybrid traditions. Music, dance, and storytelling evolved as communities learned from each other. Temples and monuments reflected not just local identity but a shared human creativity. Yet trade and innovation were not without conflict. Competition for resources led to alliances and wars. Ideas challenged traditions. New technologies could empower or destroy. Civilizations learned that progress demanded adaptation, resilience, and foresight. Through trade, humans discovered that their world was interconnected. Success was no longer local, it was. By exchanging goods and ideas, humans laid the foundations for cities, empires, and eventually global culture. Every journey of a trader, every shared invention, was a step toward a world where humanity could imagine, build, and connect like never before. Chapter 13, Writing the First Histories. As trade and communication connected civilizations, humans realized that knowledge alone was fragile. Words spoken faded with time. Observations were lost if not recorded. So writing evolved, not just for law, trade, or rituals, but for memory itself. Scribes in Sumer recorded kings, battles, and harvests. Annals documented the rise and fall of cities. Egypt's hieroglyphs chronicled pharaohs, temples, and dynasties, preserving their achievements for eternity. In the Indus Valley, seals and inscriptions recorded trade and ownership, silently telling stories of a complex society. In China, oracle bones preserved predictions, rituals, and the wisdom of ancestors. Writing allowed humans to reflect on the past and plan for the future. History became a tool for governance, legitimacy, and identity. Kings justified rule with records of ancestors, victories, and divine favor. Societies learned from failures, famine, and wars, passing lessons across generations. Science and observation advanced alongside history. Recording patterns of stars, climate, and river floods informed agriculture, trade, and strategy. Calendars and astronomy guided planting, festivals, and even politics. Knowledge became cumulative, growing richer with every generation. Cultural identity strengthened. Myths and epics, now written, survived beyond oral tradition. Humanity began to imagine its own narrative, to see itself as part of a long story. Heroes, gods, and ordinary people were all part of this unfolding chronicle. Through history, humans learned continuity and consequence. Past and present intertwined. Societies grew wiser, more resilient, and more ambitious. By documenting their world, humans not only remembered, they shaped the future, preparing the stage for empires, discoveries, and civilizations yet to come. Chapter 14: The First Empires and Their Legacies. From the first cities and written histories, empires began to rise. Sumer's city-states united under kings, creating the Akkadian Empire, the first empire in human memory. Roads, trade, and armies connected distant lands. Ziggurats rose as symbols of power and devotion. Knowledge, law, and culture spread across regions, influencing generations to come. In Egypt, the Nile nourished pharaohs' dreams of eternity. Dynasties centralized power, building pyramids and temples that would survive millennia. Agriculture, astronomy, and administration allowed massive societies to thrive. Hieroglyphs recorded everything: rituals, conquests, and the very essence of Egyptian civilization. The Indus Valley civilizations demonstrated urban sophistication. Cities like Harappa and Mohenjo-daro had precise layouts, plumbing, and trade networks. Though their writing remains a mystery, their legacy survives in the patterns of urban planning, trade, and social organization. In China, dynasties along the Yellow and Yangtze rivers shaped the earliest philosophies, bronze metallurgy, and systems of governance. Kingship, religion, and science were intertwined, creating a foundation that would influence thousands of years of civilization. Empires thrived through innovation, organization, and control of resources. Agriculture fed armies, artisans built cities, and scribes maintained records. Yet power was fragile. Internal strife, succession disputes, famine, and invasions tested the strength of these states. Some fell quickly, others endured for centuries. Despite their collapse, empires left enduring legacies. Roads, canals, and trade routes survived. Written laws, literature, and rituals continued to influence successor societies. Mathematics, astronomy, medicine, and engineering provided foundations for future civilizations. Ideas became more powerful than armies. Through their rise and fall, the first empires taught humanity a lesson: power is temporary, but knowledge, culture, and ingenuity can endure. Civilizations are built not only from conquest, but from the wisdom, art, and innovation passed down through time. The story of these early empires connects every city, nation, and civilization that followed. Humanity learned to organize, create, and govern. And through their successes and failures, the path toward the modern world slowly unfolded. Chapter 15: Science, Philosophy, and Early Innovation. As empires expanded, humans began to look deeper at the world around them. Observation became systematic. Patterns in nature, stars, and rivers were no longer mere curiosities, they were studied, measured, and recorded. Science in its earliest form was born, entwined with religion and philosophy. In Mesopotamia, astronomers charted the skies, predicting eclipses, floods, and seasons. Mathematics guided architecture, trade, and administration. Geometry was applied to land measurement, irrigation, and monumental structures. Knowledge became practical, yet also profound. Egyptians combined observation with ritual. The movement of the stars determined festivals, planting, and tomb alignments. Medicine advanced as physicians studied the human body, experimented with herbs, and recorded cures on papyrus. Technology, from simple machines to complex tools, transformed daily life and empowered rulers. In China, early philosophers pondered the principles of nature, ethics, and governance. Yin and yang, the concept of balance, guided both thought and action. Innovations in bronze, metallurgy, and agriculture reshaped societies. Writing preserved observations, theories, and inventions for future generations. Innovation was everywhere. Wheels, plows, boats, and simple machines multiplied human capacity. Humans experimented with materials, building techniques, and energy sources. Knowledge became cumulative, observation informed practice, and practice refined observation. Philosophy emerged alongside science. Questions about existence, morality, and the cosmos were debated. Humans wondered, what is life? What is justice? How should society function? These early inquiries laid the foundation for ethics, law, and governance. Through science and philosophy, humans learned to predict, manipulate, and understand their environment. They transformed raw curiosity into structured knowledge, turning observation into discovery. The first empires were not just political structures, they were laboratories of human intellect, creativity, and experimentation. Every innovation, every insight, propelled humanity forward, connecting the ancient world to all that would come after. From the first spark of the Big Bang to the rise of the first humans, the story of time is a story of wonder, struggle, and creation. Stars exploded, oceans teemed with life, rivers carved civilizations, and humans learned to observe, innovate, and connect. Every discovery, every empire, every idea is a thread in the vast tapestry of existence. We are not separate from time, we are its witnesses, its products, and its storytellers. And as we look forward, we carry with us the lessons, knowledge, and curiosity of all those who came before. Time continues. The story is still unfolding.